Thank you. Like Mariah said, I'm Jake. I work for Autodesk as a data architect. And today we're going to talk about conceptual data modeling. So one of the things that younger Jake made a lot of mistakes with was hopping in this data. He can write a query. He's awesome. He answered a problem. Everybody loves Jake, right? Future Jake does not like past Jake. And here's why. We often find in enterprises that people do exactly that. They just grab their data and go. They are
minimize that thing.
Oh yeah.
Slide.
I didn't realize that was on yours.
Thank you. You're good now. You're good.
So what happens is someone somewhere writes a query, it answers the problem. We move on, and 6 months later we forget about it. Or even worse, we start to have different business units doing different things without really a uniform view of how does the business actually work. They may say, I know how this works, I know how that works. I may be fudging some numbers for myself. Nobody knows.
Yeah, that's good.
Perfect. So common problem. This is a problem in the industry that we've had for ever, longer than I can count. So what we can, at the core of this, is that there's oftentimes a lack of a conceptual data model. So what is that? This is a one-pager that looks at just the core, what are the core concepts for our business? What are the core things? If we say we are a business and we want to operate, what do we need to know? This is directly tied to your business architecture though. So it doesn't change when you decide that you don't want Shopify anymore and you want Hybris. You're still taking orders. It's completely and totally tool agnostic and describes just the business and the business alone. When you put these together though, well, before I jump into an example, a lot of this, I like to recommend this book. It's by Steve Overman. It's influenced a lot of my thinking on conceptual data models and how they do it. When you start to get into this stuff, you do have to, one thing you have to recognize for yourself is that there's variations on approach. This isn't like you're a Hoberman guy or you're not. It's not that dogmatic, but it is important to realize that the general principles. And so with that, let's dive into an example. So let's say that we're a triathlon company. We love putting on races. This is great. Every year, we host several races at different locations. Athletes can compete either individually or as part of a team. They're grouped in based off of division, age, gender, sometimes weight. And while we mostly do triathlons, sometimes we do other multi-sport events, a dual athlon and thing, or an aqua bike, something like that. So I'm gonna switch to Lucid so I can move around a little better. So what we've done is in terms of like, okay, great, we're ready to build our conceptual model. This involves interviewing the business, talking to the people that matter, understanding what is my business architecture. And once we've done that, we can go ahead and make something like this where we say, okay, we've decided that an athlete is a core concept. And we've defined what is an athlete. An athlete is a person that participated or intends to participate in a race. A nice one-liner that helps drive that guidance. And we have other things like registration, race events, races and events. And these one-liners become really that North Star. As we start to look at these, we may start to say, well, hang on a second. Why don't teams and athletes have a relationship? Why don't athletes and divisions have a relationship? At this stage, because we've defined our business architecture, or we've tapped into the business architecture at the start, we can say, well, hang on a sec. An athlete's registration has a division. They registered for a division. this isn't a current peak into their age. It just means on such and such date, they were between 35 and 40. At their next race, they could have been between 41 years old and 45 years old. This is where we start to wrestle with some of those tricky questions. We start to say, well, we start to come up with what are our reserved words. If you're just walking the door, you might not realize when I say this person is part of this event. Does that mean that this person went and participated in an event? No. We've said in our company, an event means this is the discipline and the distances that you're doing. So are you doing a full distance try? Are you doing a sprint? How far are those distances? We start to get those words set up right now up front so that we're able to guide that ship later. Because in 6 months' time, we don't want to be arguing over this. We don't want to be rehashing. What's the definition of a customer? What's the definition of a whatever? So I'm going to pause there before we jump to the next step, the next phase. I want to see what questions there are from the group. Please, Bill.
Do you have any difficulties using those with relation on the conceptual model, or do you find it's advantageous?
I usually put it on. I like having it. I'm on free lucid, so I'm capped. But normally I have a little guide to say how to read crow's foot notation. Part of the reason I like that as well is it helps expose many-to-many relationships that when I'm talking to the business stakeholders, so that's difficult to forget them later. Please.
Do you have like kind of experience or conceptual model when you are looking at existing models which are not really great, have some misunderstanding? What are the challenges with the current model? How we can use conceptual model to present? What are the discrepancies? What need to change? What does conceptual model?
Gotcha. So I like to look at existing stuff as inspiration, but not as doctrine, not as the gospel, if you will. Because I also enjoy reading the wikis beforehand, before I meet with whatever business stakeholder, so that I know where to poke a little bit more, try and bring some stuff out. Other questions? I thought I saw another one and then two.
I've gotten this lesson many times. Each time I feel like the end result is to build a transactional system, like a data generator system instead of maybe more of a dimensional warehouse.
Mhm.
This really just for data source systems. Be also on the data.
Absolutely. So these models are irrespective of how you physically implement them. Whether you're doing a transactional model or a dimensional model, we've established there's a difference between a team and an athlete and what those definitions are. And so when you get to dim athlete, you've got a good wayfinder towards that. Please.
So, you mentioned that all of this needs to come from the business side of the organization, right?
Mhm.
Maybe this goes more into your experience. What do you think could be more challenging? Coming up with a whole concept, or talking to the business people and trying to extract what they want, or what the business is.
Gotcha. So we're wading into kind of how do I get the business to take its data seriously and invest in this?
Kind of, yeah.
A little bit. My experience has been point to failures and say like, look, oh my gosh, this was terrible. We don't want to do this again. Or, there's always that dance, right? Of do I want to do what's important right now, or do I want to do what's going to make things better in the medium and the long term for me? And so the argument that I usually put forward is saying, this is not the last time we're going to have an immediate need and a fire. We will always see these things. if we take the time to wrap our arms around our data, it will go much, much smoother. And then if I'm in a conversation, a private conversation with somebody in finance, we start talking about reduction, like how much headcount does it take? How much headcount do you really need to support the data across your organization? Not talking data team specifically, but how many people are running Excel workbooks under their desk doing just nonsense?
Do you have recommendations for generally trying to like simplify people's concepts into things rather than like jumping to like here are all these metrics that we just want big long list or just like jumping and really over the one kind of thought.
Gotcha. I do. So what I like to do is get them just to talk about their business. Our stakeholders don't create this. They just talk. Tell me about your business. What do you do? We're a sparkling water company. We're doing whatever. Just talk to me. And once you get that, you start to pick out the nouns and the verbs, and those start to influence. You're like, oh wait, hang on. Let's double click on an event. Is it what I think it is? And it makes it really easy for the stakeholders because they're just talking. Please.
I was recently part of a data modeling initiative at months where the business model actually was shifting just due to demand, where new components and dimensions were being introduced. So we had to kind of reset the whole process. So how do you make the conceptual data model flexible enough to the point where if you do have business shifts like that, you have to start from scratch essentially?
I would say if your business model changes, then your conceptual model has to change because the business model comes first. So I'm sorry to say it's impossible. It's probably not the answer you want. Sean, go ahead.
Just got a question from our remote audience that he asked if you would repeat the question.
Oh,
Recording before you answer.
sorry, Jordan.
He's the only one there, right?
If you put it in the comments, I'm sorry.
Okay, Jordan, Mariah says put it in the comments too if you have
I
questions.
can't see the
Oh, you can't see the comments. Okay.
I have my phone and I don't have another device, sorry.
Okay. Other questions from the group? Okay. So once we have our concepts defined, you'll notice that this is kind of sparse, right? And we do that on purpose. There's no dim date on this diagram. The next thing that we look at, once we have that kind of sorted,
How Overman teaching us that if you took away something from the conceptual diagram, business would likely fail or not be able to the core things it talks about.
that's true. So I'm going to repeat that for the recording and for our remote audience. Bill made the comment that Steve Overman, whose book I referenced earlier, says that if you were to remove something from your conceptual model, then the business really falls apart. That these are things that are core that they talk about all the time. Once you get your conceptual data model, then you move on to your logical data models. Now, Overman also says, it comments on a logical data model as a business solution to a business problem. So this is where we start to capture business requirements without complications about implementation. So somebody mentioned, so for example, we're not talking at this stage about data pipelines. We're not talking about necessarily down to precise data types or even how the data is represented in, our ML system is going to look at this data, but our operational system is going to look at this data. No, rather what we're doing instead is we're starting to identify, okay, we have our core, we have attributes about our core, but now there's going to be some business problems that pop up. So for example, if we take this problem we have, where you say, oh, Well, somebody can compete as a team or they can compete as an individual. Well, but they only get one race result. So how do we solve for that problem, right? This is the stage where we can start saying, oh, hang on a sec. We don't really talk about this as a business, but logically, there's or up to 3 athletes. And so now we know we've got a plan for that so that we can meet that requirement so that people can run, they can do their race, team or individuals. This is also the stage where we start putting precise definitions to things. So for example, what's the difference between a race name and a venue name? Making sure that we have examples, we illustrate what they are, so that now when we talk about it, we're able to, be precise. Once we get this locked in with everybody too, it makes it easier to, metaphorically beat people with a stick when they say, no, an X is really a Y. And pause there. Questions? What questions are there? Please.
So if you start working with, say, external partners, like for example, like sponsors start like
Mhm.
involved and they start sharing data with you about consumer data, how would you go about integrating their data with your data so that way like the tables align and like there's like this privacy,
Gotcha.
like that? What's that process?
Great question. Because so the question is what happens when we start adding new business processes, new things, like in this example, we now have a sponsor or we're taking sponsorships. So in that case, I go back to the start at the conceptual and work my way down and say, is this important enough and big enough that it becomes concept worthy? If it does, same process. If it doesn't, let's go to logical and work our way down. If it's really trivial, which it rarely is, then I would just do it on the physical layer. Other questions? Bill, please.
Something of a comment, that last thing you showed us, defining the various attributes of the system.
Mhm.
That's never been done at any company.
Yeah.
Mainly because of the data modeling. And data design was pushed into the application team that was building microservices.
Mhm.
They typically, and maybe had one course in relational data modeling, maybe something in Mongo, and that's not it. So I just didn't know.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I'm fixing everywhere I go is filling in the data definition,
Yeah.
which leads to what you were talking about at the start of this presentation, that nobody really knows what data means.
Mhm.
And so one of the first things I do when I roll in is I teach the developers and I roll out a checklist. The very first item on the checklist is make sure you're taking knowledge.
Yeah.
That's the most important part.
Mariah just asked me to summarize that for the recording, which is hard. Bill has described an industry-wide problem that we have where developers, source applications, users of the data don't define it up front. And part of the challenge that he runs into when he's starts a new gig is getting the right people in the room, kind of train them up on data modeling, train them up on this so that we're not doing the same thing every 6 months or having the same conversation. We don't start talking migrations in 3 years because we've lost track of everything. Other questions? Please.
So if we go like, the kind of understand working with.
Mhm.
Now we talk about like ownership and its relation to it. How does virtual model help in terms of drawing boundaries so that
Gotcha.
we're able to draw the boundaries where I can collision where it's something basic.
Okay. So the question is, correct, keep me honest. You have 1,500 tables. They're all over the place. How does a logical data model help you draw those boundaries and ownership? Okay. So for me, I would say I would start with the end and work my way backwards. We don't need to go through, if it were me, and if I understand the context, I would not start by saying, here's a checklist and let's logically group this stuff together, but rather start with business use case to say, oh, okay, this data is important to this group and here's the PRD or whatever product requirements there are. And then we're working backwards from there, we're able to say, oh, there's probably an 80-20 going on here. There's probably only 20% of this stuff actually matters. I thought I saw a hand in the back. Did that answer your question or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then like, nice to connect with. When you roll, always try to match it. So it's all the
I don't know why. There's nobody knows. The universe knows and that's it. Other questions. I thought I saw in the back. I could have been imagining. It's not just AI that hallucinates. Okay. So, live demo time. Very exciting, right? So for my next magic trick, I'll need a volunteer. What I need from you is tell me about your business. Just talk to me. Talk to me, Goose. Any volunteers? Please.
I work for Vivint Smart Home, and I work for the indirect and solar sales teams.
Okay.
So, basically, the business model is we share leads between solar providers, various solar providers, and then they send us leads as well, so which is a symbiotic relationship. So that's kind of my question with external partnerships, where we have in Snowflake, we have data shares where it's owned by the partner, but we see it as well. So that's the gist of the business model there. It's just the lead sharing is the main piece.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like there's really kind of two parties in this transaction, right?
Yeah.
So there's our org. How do you refer to that org? Do you just call this like us, Vivint? Or is there a more generic term for it?
Yeah, I mean, Vivint, that
Okay.
usually is just the central unit.
Cool. Is Nate Skousen still there?
I have no idea.
I'll take that as
It's a big organization.
take that as a no. I misspelled Vivint. It's entirely possible.
VIVI.
VI.
But if you use an A, then.
That's true.
Generic. Okay, so and they're sharing leads with each other, right?
Yeah, and it's multiple partners. So it's like 5 or so partners.
Okay, so wait, one lead is shared with multiple partners?
Like we send leads to multiple partners, like in our call centers, like we transfer calls to them, and then they send us leads when they do the same thing on their end.
Okay, so it's going both ways. So
Yeah.
what do you call that transfer?
Well, they're known as indirect sales, where it's like we're not making the sale, but they are, so they send us. So that's kind of the, I guess, concise way of naming it.
Okay, I guess what I'm getting is there like a term when they say, is it just, hey, I shared a lead with you, or is there a vehicle or mechanism?
Yeah, share or transfer. I mean, either
Okay.
or. Yeah.
Cool. So let's start with that. We say Vivint has many external partners. Does each external partner only work with Vivint?
No. Not
Okay.
exclusively.
Do we care about their other friends?
Well, I'm not sure if they shared stuff with our competitors because, well, I personally don't know that, but I'm sure they send leads to other, I'm
Okay,
not entirely
but
sure on that front.
For the realm of Vivint, they don't care, right?
Sure.
They can go do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, actually, I changed my mind on this. So we've got the concept of a lead, and we've got the concept of Vivint. A lead only goes to Vivint for all intents and purposes, but Vivint has many leads. And then the lead, we also have we've got a partnership going between the lead and an external partner, right? And a lead comes from one and only one external partner. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. And then an external partner will send many leads. So what's the definition of a lead?
A
how would you describe it?
customer who either qualifies for a Vivint product or has expressed interest in Vivint product.
So a customer, does that
Or
mean?
I guess, like, for example, if someone called a solar company and they got set up with solar for their home, and then and the sales rep says, hey, also we have our partner Vivint. Would you like to hear more about
Gotcha.
that? So
it's always a person. It's never a business.
no, yeah, it's all consumer. Yeah,
Okay.
all individuals.
So so when we say a lead, what do you do if there's multiple players? Let's say, you've got John and Johnny and they're the same person. Is that two different leads, but they come in twice? Is that two different leads, or is that one lead?
We have had that problem, but that's more like a duplication error. But usually it's just one household. So like, if there's like a family of 4 living in a house, then you're not going to get like both parents, for example. Like, you're only going to get one. So, but usually it's based on a new system we've done, like address matching, where like if there's two leads with the exact same address, like, and we create a whole hashing algorithm behind that, then that's how we know it's like
Okay.
a duplicate lead.
So is it fair to say a lead is a person who has expressed interest?
Yeah.
Do you have a qualification process, or is this just
I believe that's
anybody that comes through, you say, this is my lead?
Yeah. So usually the sales reps, they see on their screen if the customer that they're talking with is eligible. So that way they know if they can transfer or not for commission.
Okay. So it's pre-qualified. They're pre-qualified pretty much. Okay.
Yeah.
Boom. There it is. How's that for a definition? Cool. Tell me about your external partners.
So the part of the business I work with, they're solar providers, just nationwide. I don't know if I should go into who, but
We've got XYZ Corp. We've got Acme.
Yeah.
We've got somecompany.com.
Company A, yeah, we got multiple partners, but and they have some, they share, so they all share through the same platform, so that way it's unified. But some of them, it's like they share their data with us, and then we see both sides of things, make it transparent. But most of them, we can only see the lead information, nothing about what's happening on their end of things.
Okay. So this is what if we said external orgs that qualify leads, that generate leads?
Yeah, that's appropriate.
Okay. How do we define Vivint? The best, right?
Yes.
We'll leave that one alone for now. So am I doing okay? So I'm gonna stop there because due to time so that I want to make sure I don't run over. But this is an example of kind of how those conversations start, right? We're just talking. I'm saying, oh, tell me more. I did put in there it's a line from Harry Potter that I love, that I borrowed for that like potion making, data modeling is an exact art and a delicate science. Because as I listen, there's things that I know that I've done this so many times, or I've made so many mistakes where I'm like, oh, are we talking people or are we talking orgs? Are we talking, you know, is there some mechanism in between, like a registration that we need to be aware of? And so it's one of the frustrating things about data modeling is because your mistakes tend to stick around for years and years. It's not easy to migrate. And so more plug for ask really, really good questions. This is not something you do in a sprint and check a box. It just doesn't work that way. We've talked about this at length, but I do want to kind of close with this line in particular. I saw this on LinkedIn. I loved it. Tools don't solve problems. People solve problems. This is not something that you can go buy a tool and it'll build this for you. You can't buy a consultant that's going to build this for you because they're gone in 6 months. It's you in the driver's seat driving this change. And it is hard, but it's worth it. Because if you don't do this, then in 3, 4, or 5 years, you're going to be doing a migration because nobody knows what's going on. And it's become a data dump and everybody hates it. And hopefully you're gone in your next gig by then. And if not, then you're stuck with it. So if you do it right, then it sets your company up for success and it sets you up for success. It also is hard because there's the delayed gratification component of it. It's a lot easier just to solve that problem up front and move on. You have to have the courage to say, no, we need to put that in the backlog and we'll deal with that in a month or two, not until we build out the infrastructure necessary to make it so that you can fly and that we will never have these conversations again. With that, here's my contact info. Here's links to the slide, links to the book. What other questions are there from the group? Sean hasn't thrown any tomatoes at me. I appreciate that, Sean. Miguel, yes.
It is more like experience wise, but in your experience, what has been the most data model or applied?
Most messy data
The one that was made like spaghetti.
is just spaghetti. My last company had some pretty messy data. But it wasn't because of implementation. It was because of the business model itself. It was a direct to consumer teledentistry company. So the business model is you call us up, we send you an impression kit for your teeth. It goes back to you, you get aligners for your teeth, and then we provide treatment over the course of 6 months. Plus on top of that, we provide retainers. And so it was really tricky for that pipeline because there's a sales pipeline component to it. There's also a medical treatment pipeline associated with it. And then there's also some supply chain aspects of the data moving back and forth to be able to map that customer journey across all those different domains and touch points gets really, really tricky. Kind of tough. It took me a while just to understand the business. Other questions? Excellent. Well,
Great, let's give Dick a round of applause.